Hello, everyone. To celebrate Women's History Month, SUSE's Women in Technology Network is excited to welcome you to our month-long inspiring speaker series called In Conversation With. Every week in this month of March, we've been hosting In Conversation With dialogues. Each one has featured guest speaker hosted by a member of the SUSE team. Each hour-long session has taken us on a journey of resilience, resolve, creativity, achievement, and sometimes it gets emotional as we ultimately unpack how our guests are breaking biases. We're going to have a 40-minute dialogue between our guest and host, and then I will be moderating a 15-minute Q&A. Submit your questions, use the question box on the control panel at any time during the session, and the team behind the scenes are going to do a grand job of sharing those questions with me so that I can ask our guest and host on your behalf. And today, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce April Moe, who is SUSE's Chief Communications Officer. And also, incidentally, April is our executive sponsor of Women in Technology, our network that brings you the event today. And our very special guest that April is hosting is Amber Washington, our Services Engagement Manager at SUSE. And with that, April, a very, very warm welcome, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Jenny, and thank you so much for the warm intro. Everybody, it's my honor to be hosting Amber Washington, Services Engagement Manager at SUSE. Amber is also a survivor of childhood trauma, and she has a really powerful story to share with us today, stemming from a really personal experience that happened to her as a child. I have to tell you this, getting to know Amber over the last month has been so inspiring, and having her join us today and offering to share her story is a true privilege for all of us. So prior to this session, we took the time to record Amber so that you as our audience will have some context and just the benefit of hearing her story before our discussion begins. In this video, she's reading from a prelude to a book that she's working on called Whole, My Journey to W. Let's play the video.
I was sitting in my favorite thinking spot, one I had sat many times before, that decrepit pebbled porch at my parents' house that was sure to leave a pebble or two wedged deep within the dimples of my thighs. Thoughts of whys, hows, whens, ifs, and buts. Happy and sad, good or bad. This day was one of reflection and pain. As I sat there at 33 years old, I wasn't there as a visitor. I was home, living back at my parents' with my 3 young boys, all crammed into one bedroom. Why? Why was I here? How? How did I get here? When? When will it get better? If only I could love myself. But, so many damn buts. After leaving an 8-year marriage where I felt unfulfilled, I found myself smack dab in the deep, dark trenches of one hell of a hole, dug by yours truly. I was an expert in self-destruction, proficient in self-loathing, drowning, and taking my boys with me. Whole, hollow, depression, dark, empty. This is not what I wanted for myself, and especially not for them. How? How could I stop digging and start climbing? Suddenly, I was hit with the thought, whole. Whole. Entire. Complete. Unbroken. Intact. Whole without that W. Incomplete. Void. Missing. Add the W, and whole was now complete. This may not be a light bulb moment in anyone else, but for me, this realization was the beginning of my journey to W. On a crisp fall morning early in November 1980, Amber Dawn was born, the first child of Randy and Suzanne. With a head full of thick black hair, I was the bundle of joy they had anxiously awaited. Naive and eager, they had no way of knowing that those sleepless nights with a newborn would only be the first of many. By the time I was 2, I was fully testing the patience of my mom, who just months prior had given birth to her second daughter. Running on fumes, her patience was thinner than usual, and she spent countless hours trying to stifle that stubborn defiance right out of me. One night, as she sat exhausted, she was hit with a profound awareness that maybe, just maybe, I was going to need that stubbornness. From that point forward, she worked to nurture more and fight less. Aside from her motherly instinct, she couldn't possibly know just how much that defiance would indeed be needed. It was a fall evening, September 1988. My parents had planned to attend a temple session. They lined up a sitter who at last minute canceled. After several calls to girls in the neighborhood and still not finding anyone to sit with us, they called our grandparents. A pit quickly rose from my stomach to my chest. Grandpa had said of course he would be right over. My sisters were excited, but I was terrified. I knew that for me, it would not be a night of fun and games. After years of him threatening me with the words, "If you tell anyone about this, you will get in big trouble," I could bear no more. At long last, that defiance I so desperately needed showed up again. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something." Grandpa was told not to come. Instead, a younger girl we wouldn't normally be left with came to sit. I've wrestled with the why of their choice to leave me and still attend the temple that night. In my most vulnerable moment, I was alone. In the months, even years following, life felt like a blur. My grandparents divorced. Grandpa moved in with his parents, just 2 houses from Grandma. The only aunt I had been close with married and moved away. Family get-togethers and the life I had known were no more. The silent yet resounding ask from all of those around me was get over it. Move on. Sweep this so far under that damn rug it can never resurface. I was far too young to know or care about the legal ramifications of sexual abuse. Grandpa admitted to touching me, claiming his actions stemmed from a pornography addiction. He admitted, but not before denying, and my parents asking if I was possibly mistaken. He admitted, and even so was never arrested. He was charged with multiple counts and given a court date. I was asked to attend his hearing in the event the judge wanted to speak with me. I accompanied my dad to the Orem City Courthouse, located on the other side of a long, smelly hallway, adjacent to the public library. The hall felt extra long that day. Dark brown brick walls and a solid floor created an echo with each step. We sat outside the courtroom. Still too young to understand what anxiety was, I know now that I was filled to the brim. I was never called in. My dad was, and I was left sitting outside that courtroom completely alone. I didn't know it at the time, but my dad had gone in not to plead for justice for his daughter, but mercy for his father. Mercy was granted. Grandpa was charged with 2 counts of lewdness in the presence of a child and offered a plea in abeyance. Once he completed a year of therapy and some probation, for him, it would be as if this had never happened. This is the foundation on which I was built, one full of faults, mostly hidden, cracks and crevices so deep they would take years to discover.
How are you today, Amber? It's good to have you on our series today.
Thank you. It's beyond a pleasure to be here. It's terrifying to be here, but it's also important for me to be here. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I can only imagine, Amber, that it feels both terrifying and also empowering to be here today. And I just want to say thank you for taking a chance with us in our platform and for coming to share your story. I know that being vulnerable and being able to share your story in the hopes that you would help other people is so important to you.
Yeah.
So let's dive right into it, Amber.
Okay, let's do this.
Yeah. So you have such an incredible story of surviving childhood trauma. I mean, I've seen the video many times, and each time I've watched it, I just fight the urge to yell, to cry, to just, I rage. And let's start with the first question, which is that your grandfather sexually abused you when you were little, and that went on for years. How did you, as a young child, recognize abuse when it happened?
That's a great question. And I don't know that I can say that I recognized it as abuse, right? What I can tell you is that on that night, like I talked about in the video, right, is that this pit just rose. Like I knew because at this point it had been 2 to 3 years. And so I knew what was coming. And not only that, but his abuse was getting more brazen. It was getting more often. It was, it was just getting worse. And so the thought of me being alone and him being at our home for several hours that night was terrifying enough that I had to say something. And so I did.
I'm so glad that you did. And isn't it so important, even just, listening to your telling us about not feeling comfortable, knowing that something is not right, to trust that instinct and to act on it. So thankful that you did. So after that, you told your parents, but that happened after years of abuse.
Correct.
What was it like for you to tell it to them?
So part of trauma, and I think part of age, right, is that we lose recollection of our childhood, and we lose memories, and definitely part of my trauma, the recovery, and the effects that took place was that there's a lot of things that I don't remember. And so even in preparing to have this conversation, I've had to refer back to journals. My journals don't actually talk a lot about this stuff, but it did help me to get a sense of maybe where my emotions or my feelings were, and I've gone to various family members and tried to piece together timelines and just different things. And so, yeah, it's just, I remember, there's just no way that I wasn't terrified, right? And like I talk about in my book, I was too young. We didn't know what anxiety was. We certainly didn't talk about it back in the 80s. And so, but there's no doubt that I was filled with anxiety. So it was difficult to tell them. And I think that part of that reason would be that even if I was too young, to comprehend how far reaching this was going to go and, all the ripple effects after, there had to have been something in me that knew that this was going to change my world. It was going to change my world, and that this was somebody that I loved, And when you're a child, especially, we do so much to please our parents and to please teachers and to please grandparents and to please adults around us. We just want to be loved and to be good. We want to be good.
These are all really, really tough feelings to work through. And in spite of all of that, what do you think allowed you to move forward, knowing that you felt all of those things, knowing that you would rock the boat, knowing that you used the word terrified, feeling all these things? What allowed you to move forward?
Well, two things, I think. Fear. Fear of what was coming. And then it was that defiance too that I talk about. I still have that. If you know me at all, you know that. But I still have a very defiant, stubborn side to me, where if something's wrong, even in elementary school, I stuck up for other kids. I was bullied. I was constantly told that I was fat and ugly. And so that was hard for me, but it was harder for me to watch other kids go through that. So from a very, very young age, there's just always been something that's ingrained in me that says, stand up for yourself and stand up for other people.
I love hearing that. And Amber, what you just said really reminded me of my conversation last week with Wayne, where, there's a common thread between you and him and as featured guests on our series, right? Which is the whole notion of you both have suffered, and that, in spite of your suffering, you're putting other people first, and you're thinking about how your suffering can become, almost a point of growth and benefit for other people. So that really inspires me. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. To your point, April, for myself, and I'm sure that it's the same for Wayne or for anybody that does speak about something that's hard, it helps me to make sense of the senseless. And there has to be something good that comes out of this. There just has to be.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, in looking at and watching the video again, I mean, there are 2 points, Amber, that that just really where I felt my blood pressure rise for you. The first was when your parents continued to go out, right? When you told them that just you didn't want grandpa with you, and they didn't let him come, but they still went out. And then the second point of that was when I think it was later on as an adult that you learned that at court that day, your dad went in not to fight for justice for you, but to plead for mercy for your grandfather. Walk us through how you felt at both of those incidents.
So a couple of years ago, I was working at a law firm, and that gave me access to records that are not generally available to the public, right? And so I pulled my grandfather's record, and that was the first time that I had seen what his charges were. And that was really, it was really difficult to just see, knowing what I knew and knowing what I knew had been done, to read that he was charged with 2 counts of lewdness in the presence of a child, was a slap in my face. But that knowledge right there then led me to questions, and that's how I found out, right? I don't know why my dad told me. I'm grateful that he did. I think it's really important to be honest, but I'm surprised that he would tell me something like that. It angered me. It angered me bad. There's been several times in my life that my dad and I have not spoken, and that's really difficult for me because family means everything to me. My family means everything. So to be a child and even an adult who doesn't feel that your child means everything to you is heartbreaking. I'm sorry.
Take your time, Amber. This is hard.
It's been the hardest part of this for me, right? When I talked earlier about just having this, I had to have had this like innate understanding, right, that my world was going to change, but I didn't know that it was going to change to this level. I did not know that people were going to defend him. I did not know that his life would be worth more than mine. He died when I was 17 years old. So there was only a 10-year period, where he would have still been alive. And during that time, we still saw him. My family still went around him. He got married. He actually got remarried in the temple. And for those of you who don't know anything about the LDS religion, you have to be worthy to be married in the temple. Being worthy means that you've repented for your sins. Repenting for your sins means that you have made restitution. You've done a whole bunch of things. Repentance, I think, is not, specific to the Mormon religion at all. I think everybody understands what repentance is. But so to know that those things didn't take place, and yet, like I said, like he just got to carry on with his life, and I didn't. And that in those years, in those 10 years, I started acting out. I was constantly grounded. I was constantly reminded of how bad I was. And so for me, there's been this recurring theme throughout my life where I feel anyhow, that I've been held to higher standards than a lot of other people, and that anything that I do is scrutinized under this, this telescope that just says bad, 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 bad. You're bad.
Yeah, I can imagine all of that. I mean, just seeing, how your your aggressor was given a relatively light, sort of punishment to, as compared to you. I mean, all of that has got to be shaping the way that you view yourself. How did that all come together in the way that you started to view yourself over the years?
I hated myself. When I talk about the self-loathing and the self-destruction, I'm here for a reason, and I'm so grateful to be here because I love who I am now. But that has taken years and years to get to right. It's beyond me how I haven't taken my own life at different times, or how I've never succumbed to a drug addiction for whatever reason. I'm so grateful. But it has. It's hard to say that that it shaped me in any bad ways, because again, I love this woman. I love who I am.
So do we.
I have fought really, really hard to be her. But he killed me. He killed me. I had to reshape who I was. I had to rebirth myself into somebody who was now going into a world that didn't comfort her, didn't feel safe, didn't love her, and so honestly, it affected my mental health. It affected my physical health. I have been overweight to obese my entire life. I acted out at a very young age. I was very promiscuous, and sought out friends that maybe weren't the best influences. And so, like I said, like, I was grounded. I was constantly told how bad I was, but being bad was what I was good at. And so I owned that. For the longest time, I owned that. And instead of ever being told or feeling like, hey, you're going through this because this happened to you, I took the opposite approach. And I was like, nope, I'm not weak. This hasn't affected me. I'm stronger than this. And the longer that I held to that mentality, April, the more damage it done. It did. It wasn't until recently, just within the last couple of years, that I was able to give myself the grace of forgiveness. And that came through saying, Amber, these choices that you made were shaped from your trauma. And being able to own that and not feel shame in that, because it's really important to me that I take responsibility for my actions and own those consequences, right? And so I felt like I couldn't do that if I was blaming my trauma. But I recognize now that it's not blaming, it's not pointing fingers, it's fact. It's fact. Those things changed me. They shaped my views, they shaped my decisions, and I can do both things. I can recognize the trauma, the way that it reshaped my brain and who I was, while still taking responsibility for choices that I've made and for people that I've hurt.
That sounds like such a big breakthrough in terms of actually calling and recognizing all of that as trauma, and the realization that you've been living in your trauma almost your entire life. I think that that's a really big deal. And what stands out to me, Amber, is that what you said about how instead of blaming the trauma, what it sounded like the shift really happened when you decided to pursue your own healing, independent of somebody saying sorry to you, your grandfather being able to just admit his failures to you, because that's no longer possible. But you went ahead to pursue your own self recovery and your own self healing. That's really inspiring to me. In all that you said earlier, you listed a few moments of vulnerability. I mean, you mentioned being good at being bad. You mentioned, promiscuity. You mentioned just a lot of just things that you did acting and living out of your trauma. The one thing that I took notes when you were talking to me just a few weeks ago was the whole notion that vulnerability and moments of vulnerability are not linear, and that when they happen, you just keep going. Can you talk us through some of the key moments of recognizing your own vulnerability, and what did you do with them?
Yeah. The biggest shift in my life came in 2013 when I was arrested and I went to jail. I had gone to my ex-husband's house to pick up my kids, and this was months after dealing with disagreements on parenting time and just going back and forth. My divorce was hard. It was really hard. And so already there's a ton of emotion and everything there. And I went, and I shouldn't have, but I went, and it ended up in a physical altercation where I pushed his wife off of me, and I was arrested. And just a week prior to that, I had been date raped. I went against everything inside of me that was saying, don't go, and I went. And that night, I just remember laying in bed, or that morning, and just being really disgusted with myself and so angry with myself. How could you let that happen again? Like, how could you do that to yourself? And why don't you listen to yourself? And all these things, right, that go through your mind, especially when, as adults, and it's somebody that we know and we know we shouldn't have done that, we internalize that. It was our fault. It wasn't his, it wasn't theirs, it wasn't, it was our fault. And so anyhow, through conversation with a friend and my sister, I found the strength to call the police. And anybody that has ever made a phone call like that knows how hard it is. We all see TV shows and movies, and we all read articles and comments of people saying, well, she did that. Why did she put herself there? And is she even telling the truth? And different things like that. So that call in and of itself was terrifying to me, but I did it. And answered all the questions. And I went to the hospital to do a really invasive rape exam, which also happened when I was 7. And so a week later, I show up at my ex-husband's house, and my emotions are not in check at all. And as I'm sitting in the back of this police car, handcuffed, the enormity of the injustice throughout my life hits me. And I just am so sick to my stomach and angry. And how am I going to jail for pushing somebody when the person that raped me is not sitting in jail? And this hadn't happened at the time, but the DA declined to file charges in this case because there wasn't enough physical evidence. And my grandpa never sat a day in jail, but here I was going. And this, you're just not going to be much more vulnerable than when you're doing a rape exam, or when you're sitting in jail and they're doing a strip search. And I was bare, just physically and mentally bare, and writhing in this anguish. But little would I know, April, that this would be the catalyst that would propel me to who I am and where I'm at now. Because in that moment, I recognized the strength in keeping my emotions in check, while still standing up for myself, right? Because I was seen as crazy and unhinged that day, and I was crazy and unhinged that day. I had just suffered another trauma. But that, again, that's my strength. My voice is my tool, and I think it's my greatest gift, because I've learned to pick my battles, but I will never be silenced.
Thank you for sharing that. And I love what you said about your voice. I want to pick up on something that you said earlier, Amber, about just this powerful message of accountability, right? You talked earlier about owning your own faults, and you do that. You do that with a lot of bravery. owning ourselves, owning our faults, that is a tremendously scary thing for all of us. And so for you, what is it so important? What is so important about owning your own faults that makes you do what you do? Why is it important for you to own your own faults?
Because owning my faults takes away the negative hold that they might otherwise have. If I come to you and I say, April, I was really promiscuous. You know, if I say, April, I've gone to jail, and I've gone to jail twice, actually. That's my second jail story. You know, if I can tell you these things, if I can talk about what my faults are or were in my first marriage, or, you know, just different things that I have done that are embarrassing, then it takes the negative hold that they have on me. I own that story. It's not a story that's going to be told because somebody that doesn't like me gets on social media and tells it for me. Or, you know, I'm being whispered about at the water cooler or something. It's vitally important to me that I own my mistakes, and I no longer have a criminal record. Everything has been expunged, but it's always important to me anytime that I'm interviewed for a job that that's something that I bring up right off the bat. Hey, I have criminal charges, and I do that because I hope, and it's worked out for me, I hope that people are willing to hear why and me instead of just see something on paper and make assumptions. So a lot of, I don't know, if you feel like it's crazy to be having this conversation at work, raise your hand. You know, I do. But let me tell you why we're having this conversation. Because before I even got hired at SUSE, I had heard about Melissa DiDonato and the leadership and the changes that were coming, right? I was a part of Micro Focus. And Micro Focus and SUSE used to be a combined company. And so when they split, there were a whole bunch of people that I knew that had gone over there. So of course I'm hearing about April, or excuse me, Melissa. And so when I got hired on at here and I'm joining LinkedIn and I'm being more active, about a year ago, Melissa shared a post about the FSF, the Free Software Foundation, and how she was really upset because they had just reinstated one of their founders who had been previously removed from the board due to accusations of poor treatment of women and other misconduct. And Melissa said, like, this is not okay. She said it wasn't okay. And it affected me so deeply that I reached out to her and I just thanked her for saying that, because and through these conversations is actually why we're here, right? It is so powerful when we have leaders who stand up and speak out. Melissa knew that there was a chance that she would have backlash, and she did. You know, there was some backlash on that post, and she did it anyway, and that was so brave to me. And I just want to, I want to encourage that bravery. I want to be an example of that bravery. I want other people to understand that it is brave to face everything that we all face, whether it's trauma, you know, disability, COVID. We are all brave for everything that we have faced. And we can do that together, and to work for a company who I feel is creating a safe space for people to do that means more to me than I could ever convey. And I want to be a part of that movement, that growth, that feeling, whatever it is. I want to take this opportunity and this platform and make sure that we reach as many people as possible.
Amber, that is an honor to hear that. I'm so glad that, you know, this has been a safe place for you. The observation that I've had with people who use their voice is that every time we use our voice to say something, it will cost us something. But when I've looked back on my own experiences, on your experience, on Melissa's, and on, you know, any other person, not even just leaders, but people who have spoken up,
Yes.
The one common theme is that vulnerability begets vulnerability. It just gives permission to other people to open up and to share. You opened up to me serendipitously. If you know, if we were not connected through a share, a voice that's out there doing the right thing, saying the right thing, then you and I probably would not have connected. I probably wouldn't have found other women sharing, similar challenges. You probably wouldn't have found a lot of the people that are just such a community around you today. So the power of the voice is so powerful, it's just important. And I want to thank you for specifically calling that out and for encouraging bravery.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Well, the bias that we're breaking today is really, the bias of mental health stigma, right? There's a stigma associated with that, with caring for our mental wellness. What messages about embracing mental wellness would you like to be explicit about with our audiences today?
That having the mental wellness and wanting to care for yourself and your mental wellness and to talk about that does not equal weakness. In fact, it's the exact opposite. It is strength, it is bravery, it is everything that we need to be able to face those fears, right? And to thrive, because for the longest time, again, I just was stuck on this this mentality of I'm bigger than this and I'm better than that and I'm stronger than it and it hasn't affected me, instead of allowing myself the grace to be affected by it, to face that, to get help. I was sent to therapy, pretty much right off of the bat, and spent all of my childhood years anyway bouncing from therapist to therapist. I hated it. I never found anybody that I related to. And I remember after taking a handful of pills and winding up in a mental institution for a couple of days, sitting there with this older woman, much older, with a whole bunch of books, and she just looked very scholarly and, all this stuff, and thinking, what the hell does she know? Like what is it that these books have told her? Because if you haven't been through what I've been through, how do you know? And now I recognize the importance of both of those things, because therapy as an adult has been vital for me. But that the scholarly research, papers, study, all of that goes into the therapy that is provided by these wonderful people who take our stories in and day out is absolutely necessary. It's true, it's real. But that having a community of people around you that can be empathetic and understand, all of our situations are different, but when there's a common theme, when you find that, it just provides the space of, I just can't even tell you how supported I feel right now. The messages that have come across my emails and my phone, in fact, I had to go put my phone away, so that I could just fully concentrate. I've never, ever felt so supported in my life. And I've needed that for so long, but for the longest time, I felt like if I was asking for that, I was being dramatic, I was seeking attention. It was all attached to a very negative mindset and not what it is. And that's that I deserve space in this world. I deserve a safe space in this world, and we all do.
And that is a right. That should be a right, not a privilege. Last week we talked about normalizing emotions at work, which is something that you and I truly believe in. And this week, why can't we just normalize owning our mental health and normalizing mental wellness at work? I'm so glad that you've found community, you've found therapy that's effective for you. I'm a huge proponent of therapy, and it has done a world of good for me. So it's just something really meaningful for me to hear from you, Amber. Now, we are a little bit short on time. I do have one more question that I would love to just double down on. So over the last month, or actually even further out, 2 months, I've had I've had the pleasure of getting to know you as my colleague and my friend. In your journey to W, you told me a few things that were really interesting to me about taking, the bull by its horn and seizing opportunities. So let's talk about two things here. Let me start with the first, which is the whole notion of, even as you were living in your trauma, you took opportunities when they happened. Tell us about that time amidst your journey when you just took the plunge and accepted that 3-month contract at Micro Focus.
Yeah, that's a fun story to tell. Yeah, so it was 2015, and after my divorce, sorry, let me back up. I don't have a college degree. I had my son when I was 21 years old, had been a stay-at-home mom. And so, getting divorced, I knew I was going to have to find something. And so I returned to what I knew, and that was customer service. And so I bounced from job to job, just looking for a fit, something that would work with my schedule, my personality. What do I want to do? Where can I grow? And in 2014, I started working at Winco Foods, and I was making $9 an hour, but I liked it. Like, I actually liked the interaction, and I saw a lot of opportunity there. And so that was my mindset going in, is, hey, I can manage a grocery store. Like, I'm a people person, I can do this. And so that's what I set out to do, was to move up. And after a couple of months of being trained in various positions and just working my tail off, making no money, I interviewed for a position that I didn't get. And it was at that point that I was like, okay, I think I need to start looking for something else. And so I had put something on Facebook, and somebody responded and said, hey, my company's hiring. Great, tell me about it. But there just wasn't a ton of information about Micro Focus, right? So I had no idea what the pay was going to be. I just knew it was kind of customer service oriented. So I remember waking up that morning, April, and starting to get ready. And I'd done several interviews over the weeks prior to this, and I wasn't getting calls back, and that was not usual for me. And so my mindset that morning was, man, am I wasting my time? I'm going to go and I'm going to do this, and they're not going to hire me anyway. And should I even go? And on the very other side of that thought was the thought, Amber, if you don't do this, you can't complain about what isn't offered to you, right? Like, just go try. And so I did. And I killed it. I killed the interview. And when my really good friend who hired me, his good friend now, right? He didn't know me then, but David, when he hired me and he told me what it paid, and it was $17 an hour, my jaw just about hit the floor. I was trying to make sure he didn't see that, but I was like, oh gosh. And then I'm hearing that it's supposed to just be a real temp position, like you're here for 3 months. But I knew that in that time I needed to take every opportunity that was coming my way to learn about different things. I didn't know what an operating system, I didn't know what OS stood for, right? I didn't know what an operating system was when I started. But damn, I was going to take any opportunity that anybody would give me. I worked the graveyard shift. And after 3 months, there was another person that was hired with me at the same time that was meant to have the long-term contract, and I got the long-term contract. And that long-term contract turned into a permanent position almost 2 years later. And that permanent position turned into a promotion in sales that I didn't think that I was qualified for, and that doubled my salary again and changed my life. And then in 2020, I was laid off from Micro Focus. And so the first text was to David. And he said, hey, do you know of anything, is there anything at SUSE that I could do? And he said, yeah, there's this position, that I think you'd be great for. And he told me that it involved contracts. And I was like, I can't do contracts. But he's like, Amber, you can do this. You got this. And I got it. And I'm good at it. And I love it. And look where it's gotten me. I went from not being able to take care of my kids making less than $20,000 a year to making a hell of a lot more than that.
That is amazing. I mean, it's definitely credit to you for pushing yourself forward. I mean, in the midst of, you know, your trauma and really dealing with all that's happening in your life, pushing yourself through, taking chances, and then just really also finding yourself in a company of people who believe in you.
Yes.
That I think that is a really important message for all of us here, which is to be looking out for people that we can help and that people that we can believe in, that we can sponsor. I think that that's a really important message for all of us. Now,
Absolutely.
we are a little bit over time, and I do want to make sure that we're making time for Q&A because that is the most exciting part of the conversation for me personally. But let me just quote and tie it all together. You said that trauma does not have to define us. We define us. So, parting words, tell me more about what that means to you.
I just wholeheartedly believe that we can be anybody that we want to be, that we can overcome anything. I say that all the while knowing how hard it is, knowing the breakdowns that I have had through the last 3 months as I've prepared for this, the huge ugly cry I did this morning before I put makeup on. It is hard. And so I don't want to walk away from this talk setting false expectations that, hey, she's smiling, she's successful, it's been easy for her. It's been far from, but everything that has been so hard for me only makes me prouder to be who I am and where I'm at today. And everybody can get that.
That is such an important message, that we don't ride off into the sunset, and that mental wellness is not a destination, or, you know, living out of our trauma is not an actual destination. So thank you for reminding us of that, and thank you for the message that you're sharing, which is to get up and go again another day, and get up and go again. That is so important. Well, Amber, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. Jenny, if I can invite you back, I'm going to hand this over to you, and the stage is yours, Amber, to take on any Q&As that may, I think, questions that have come through.
Thank you, April. Thank you, Amber. I'm actually going to start with just a few comments, Amber, before we get into the questions, because your community and your tribe is growing by the minute. And I'll start with just some of the ones that have resonated absolutely deeply with me. We sure love you, Amber. We've got your back, Amber. So proud of you for telling your story. Truly amazing, Amber. Thank you for sharing. And I'll indulge just one more comment, because I could literally sit here till the end of the call with the comments we're getting. This one is going to be the final one before we get into the questions. And you must know this, Amber. Know this from your community. You are absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Your strength is admirable. Your voice and your story is powerful. And I hope you keep sharing it on any platform that presents itself.
I'm going to.
And we look forward to hearing you some more. And with the few minutes we have left, I'm just going to dive into a couple of these questions. And there are so many questions for you, Amber. And here's a fairly straightforward one, Amber. You talked about, you know, memories and not being able to recall certain things. And I'm sure that's part of the sort of mechanism for protecting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But you talked about the journaling. Is that a practice that you still do? And how's that actually helped you with your growth currently or historically?
Yeah, I love that question. So journaling specifically, no, but I write. I, scribble thoughts all over the place. And that's why I'm writing a book, because I know that I need a central location to put all of these thoughts. I also know that when I'm finally able to get all of these different experiences, thoughts, and feelings down onto paper, it is going to be a huge part of closure for me, right? Of that healing. And I'm never, ever gonna get over this, right? And I don't I don't want to get over it. I want to feel it. I want to heal, and I want to help other people. And so it's been super important to me to write at different times, and to talk to different people, right? Or to post maybe on Facebook or different social media, and try to just try to open conversation for other people too. But it's been vital in this process because the older that we get, the just it's the less that we remember. So I would strongly encourage journaling, writing, reaching out, talking, anything that you can do to communicate, because we're not all able to communicate to other people. I understand that, and I respect that, but there's several means that we can use to get those feelings out, get them out, however you can.
Yeah, and definitely working in communication, I hear exactly what you're saying, Amber, in that there are different ways of communicating. It's not always in the obvious ways, and definitely we do need to get it out. And talking about your book, can you say a little bit more? Have you got a publication date in mind? How far are you into the writing of the book? Could you share a little with your...
Sorry, I interrupted you. I have made a commitment to myself to finish this book this year, because it hurts, because I've never allowed myself to sit in this pain for this long of a time, right? I agreed to do this talk. We started talking about this the end of December, and that's a long time to feel daily what I'm feeling. And so it's really important for me to get it out. I don't have a publisher. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to get it all on paper, and I'm going to work really hard to either find a publisher or self-publish or whatever, because I want the complete story to be available to other people, because I know it will help people.
And we have no doubt that you're going to get that book written, and no doubt that you're going to find someone to publish. There was a question here that asked about, again, the person here said, thank you for having the courage to share your story. Could you say a little bit, Amber, how do you think people who haven't gone through a trauma like yours can actually help to help others?
I'm so grateful that that question has been asked, because it's so important. There's way too many of you out there that know what I'm talking about and that can relate to something of this nature. But there's more of you that can't, and for that I'm grateful. Be a safe space. If I could scream from the rooftops and have every single person in this world hear me, it would be to believe people when they disclose. Validate those that are brave enough to share their stories, because you just cannot imagine the irreparable harm that is done when people are not believed.
Yeah, I think we've seen so many examples in the media, through people that we know, through you sharing your story today, that when people are silenced, that just doubles down on the trauma and the damage that's been done to the individual. So thank you for that, Amber. I'm going to take one more question before we actually have to wrap. And actually, April, we'd like to just bring you back into the conversation at this point, because it's about parenting, and I'm going to just pick this question for you, April. Someone's asked, as a parent, hearing Amber talk about bullying and her advice to stand up for yourself and other people, how important is it for you to share that message with your daughter?
Wow, that's a really important message. And this question, I was laughing because this question was probably asked because every chance I get with Amber, with you, with the team, I'm always talking about my 2-year-old toddler, a little girl, my first child. So yes, it is really important to help them recognize when to speak up when it comes to things not feeling right. That's why I started with, that first question for Amber, which is, how did you recognize abuse as a young child? I asked that in the capacity of a mother, and in the capacity of a woman of color, you know, with a child that will be growing up experiencing perhaps a different, you know, a different world that many others would experience. And so in the way that, you know, that I parent, and Amber, you and I have talked about this too in one of our engagements with Leopoldo and his girls, is the whole notion of believing your child when they speak and they share, when they tell you something. Help them to find validity in what they say, and help and really just let everything that they say be legitimate. Don't undermine, don't laugh, don't make fun of them, but help them trust their instinct and help them trust in the strength and the power of their voice. And I have to tell you that, you know, that philosophy has really also been shaped in my discourse with Amber, in understanding, you know, at a very young age, teaching our children that they have a voice and that they can speak to us and that we will be there for them, that we will protect them. That's the number one thing.
Absolutely.
Amber, just in the final minute or two, what would you like to say in terms of to other parents out there, what you've experienced and what you'd like them to take away from today's session?
I would echo everything that April just said and really put an emphasis on the protecting part, right? Is listening, validating, and protecting, because above all else, that is our responsibility. That is the gift that we are given when we are parents, is these humans that don't know, that are innocent, that love us, you know, unconditionally. So honor that and protect it, and don't minimize. The statistics are overwhelming that when a child discloses, they are telling the truth. Believe them.
Thank you for
Amber?
advocating for children everywhere, Amber, and for, you know, I think also advocating for the child in you that was unadvocated for when this all happened to you. I think the thing that I'm so thankful to see right now here today is that you are better than the worst thing you've ever done. You are loved, you are protected, you are defended by a community that you can call family. And I'm so thankful for that as I see that really manifest around you. So thank you for that.
I am so thankful.
And Amber, April, on behalf of the audience and the team behind the scenes, thank you so much for sharing your story today. You know, we appreciate you. We have so much love that we will share after this session. There's been some lovely comments for you personally, Amber. So thank you again, April, for hosting the session. We have one more session that we're hosting on Thursday. Have a look at SUSE.com. April Moe has a blog post there. It's got the details for the final session, 1 o'clock BST on Thursday. And on that note, Amber, thank you so much.
Thank
April,
you so
thank
much,
you.
Amber.
The love
Really,
is
thank you so much.
definitely there for you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jenny. Bye.